for joining. Thank you for joining today's session on investing in youth skills for a green future. My name is Charlie Havisham. I am the Global Co-Lead for Education at Dalberg, based in Nairobi, as well as the Co-Director for the Education Finance Network, one of the co-hosts for today's session. The Education Finance Network is a global platform of over 130 members that brings together donors, implementers, and private actors with the aim of increasing and improving finance for education. It facilitates collaboration, like today's session, evidence sharing, and innovation in financing approaches. And it's great to be co-hosting today's session with two of our members, VVOB and Nova Escola. With COP30 in Brazil highlighting education through a dedicated thematic day, financing climate education has become an urgent priority. Climate education must go beyond awareness to equip youth with skills and pathways for green economies. This requires investment in teachers, implementers, and innovative financing models that build green skills and create opportunities. Today's webinar, it's great to be convening educators, implementers, and funders to share approaches and identify actions to advance financing and youth employment in green jobs ahead of this year's COP. Bringing the educator's perspective, I'm pleased to be joined by Cristiana Ferraz, a specialist in educational resources at Nova Escola, and Maria Raquel Souza dos Santos, a teacher in a municipal network of Manaus. We'll hear insights from implementers with Kavina Mugwe, Global Strategic Advisor for Partnerships at VVOB, and Claudia Cadena, the Country Programs Manager in Ecuador for VVOB as well. And Amit Shah, Executive Director of Bridges Outcomes Partnerships, will bring us insights from a funder's perspective. So hopefully, a broad set of insights from different parts of the ecosystem. A few kind of housekeeping. This session will be run in English with interpretation into Spanish and Portuguese. Where the presentations are in Portuguese, there's also translations in English and Spanish as well. You will see the interpretation globe at the bottom of the screen, and there are some getting a bit of feedback there. Oh. And Diego has also posted some instructions in the chat as well. We want to give as much space as possible for discussion. So please, as the presentations are taking place, please do put some questions in the chat, and we can pick those up in the Q&A after the presentations. But for now, I'll hand over to our co-hosts, Kavina and Cristiana, for some opening remarks. Over to you, Kavina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you, members of the panel, my colleagues, and all the wonderful people who joined us this afternoon. It is afternoon, 4 o'clock in Nairobi, where Charlie and I are, but it's different times wherever everybody else is, but welcome. And I hope you'll enjoy the session. Perhaps I could begin by telling you a story about Western Uganda, well, from Western Uganda. In a small secondary school, a young teacher, Mr. Mbazira Hadidi, known as Mr. Soil, was frustrated. His students came from farming families, yet none of them wanted to farm. To them, the land symbolized struggle, not opportunity. That changed when his school joined the Green Leap project in Uganda, which supports teachers to integrate climate smart and practical learning into the classroom. Mr. Soil began teaching differently. His students built simple irrigation systems from recycled bottles, tested drought-resistant crops, and learned how waste could become fertilizer. The classroom came alive, and so did the students. The group started a small garden that now supplies vegetables to the local market. Another taught their parents composting at home. It's a small story, but it carries a big truth. And the truth is that when teachers are empowered, learners become innovators, and classrooms become launchpads for climate action. This is what investing in new skills for a green future looks like in practice. But Uganda also reminds us of the challenges. Many schools lack the tools and training to make learning relevant to the realities of climate change. And while young people are eager, green career paths remain limited and fragmented. Now, as we prepare for COP30, one truth stands out. Green transition will succeed only when it is empowered by people with the right skills, the right mindset, and the right values. People power the transition. And this is it's not just about technology and infrastructure. It is about people. And education is our most powerful lever to prepare societies for this transformation. We face a global readiness gap, a crisis of readiness, jobs postings requiring at least one green skills have grown by 22%, but the share of the green talent has increased by only 12%. That's not just a statistic, it's a warning signal that our education systems and labor markets are not out of sync. Are out of sync, actually, they are out of sync. Now, at the VVOB, our goal is to ensure that every learner gains the mindset and competencies for a sustainable future. Education is a foundational climate action. Climate readiness must start early, from classrooms to careers. Teachers and school leaders are the true catalysts of this change. When we invest in them, transformation becomes systemic and lasting. Now, despite this, its importance, climate education remains unfunded. We need stronger alignment between governments, donors, and the private sector to truly scale system-wide transitions. Now, as we look forward to COP30, we have an opportunity. But let's be clear, education, youth, and skills are not peripheral to climate policy. They are its foundation. Thank you very much. I hope that sets the scene, and I'll hand you over to my colleague, Cristiano, to tell you more and lead us to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavina. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today representing Nova Escola and the many Brazilian teachers who are already engaging with climate education in their own classrooms. First of all, Nova Escola is a non-profit organization, a Brazilian non-profit organization that has been working for almost 40 years to support public schools teachers across Brazil. We create free educational resources. We offer professional development and produce journalism that values teachers' voices and shares inspire classroom practice. At Nova Escola, we believe that preparing young people for sustainable futures begin by investing in those who teach them, the teachers. Climate education is not just an additional topic for us. It is a new lens through which we can understand and teach the world. Over the past years, we have strengthened our commitments to this agenda through several initiatives. One example was a national survey with teachers to understand how climate change is being addressed in classrooms. The results showed us that showed a strong motivation by teachers, but also challenge such as lack of materials, time, and training opportunities. We also organized a training on climate education in Belém this year which brought together 50 public schools teachers from across Brazil to explore active methodologies, climate, and environmental justice. And through the year, we have produced lesson plans, online courses, and journalist articles that help educators bring climate topics into their daily teaching. Next week, we will be back in Belém with another group of teachers from our Nova Escola community, participating in activities related to COP30 and continuing this dialogue on how educators can lead change from their classrooms. I'm also happy that today we will hear from Maria Raquel, one of the incredible teachers from our network, who will share her own experiences teaching climate education in the Amazon region. Brazil has a strong foundation for advancing climate education. What we need now is scale, investment, and visibility. Because if we truly want to prepare the next generation for a green future, we must first invest in those who guide them every day, our teachers. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christian. With that great introduction, I will hand over to Maria Raquel, who will be our first presenter to share the perspectives from the classroom. Over to you, Maria.
Bom dia a todos. Fico muito feliz pelo convite da Nova Escola, fico muito feliz pelo convite deste seleto grupo de participantes interessados, pessoas colaborativas aí nessa perspectiva de mudança educacional, né, no mundo, onde a gente pode fazer a diferença, né, na vida de tantos estudantes, de tantos jovens, de tantas crianças, que no meu caso atuo com crianças bem pequenas, né? Eu sou professora Maria Raquel Santos, sou educadora da Secretaria Municipal de Educação de Manaus, atuo no Amazonas, região amazônica, numa creche pública à beira de um igarapé poluído. Eu sempre faço esse recorte de contexto porque o lugar, o espaço e o território, eles falam muito de onde o educador, né, de onde surge a voz desse educador. Então, o meu contexto e o meu território, eles mostram um pouco do meu trabalho, eles já dialogam um pouco do meu trabalho, daquilo que eu faço, né? E eu estou aqui hoje para partilhar uma experiência muito interessante que nós fizemos aqui na nossa região com crianças bem pequenas. Aqui na nossa creche, nós atendemos crianças de 11 meses a 3 anos de idade. Então, são crianças bem pequenas mesmo, mas são nesse contexto de sementes do hoje e do amanhã, entendendo essas crianças tão pequenas como o sujeito de direitos, e os seus territórios, nesses territórios incluindo aí toda a comunidade que está envolvida na educação dessas crianças, que surge nessa proposta de trabalho da qual a gente vai apresentar hoje. O projeto que nós fizemos, ele atingiu aproximadamente 5.000 pessoas, uma intersetorialidade que nós tentamos fazer, territorial, dentro de uma creche pública e com parcerias externas, né? O nome do projeto que nós desenvolvemos foi Incluarte e Sustentarte, a sustentabilidade na arte como promotora de inclusão em um território degradado. Essa proposta ela surgiu a partir de um contexto, de uma situação pontual, né? Eu sou professora de atendimento educacional especializado, sou professora de crianças com deficiência, com a especificidade da deficiência, e foi nesse contexto aí de busca de entendimento dessas famílias, nesse diagnóstico precoce, que a gente tentou trabalhar aí a inclusão associada à sustentabilidade e também o resgate desse território. Conseguimos construir aqui um jardim dos sentidos sustentáveis para essas crianças e para suas famílias, a partir de materiais que seriam descartados no nosso Igarapé do 40, o Igarapé poluído que margeia a nossa instituição. Então, nesse contexto, a gente promoveu aí várias ações, né? O Jardim dos Sentidos, ele foi apenas uma das ações para trabalhar a sensibilidade sinestésica dessas crianças através de elementos que a gente tirou do igarapé, através de garrafas que seriam descartadas lá, através da areia, através das inúmeras espécimes arbóreas amazônicas que nós conseguimos colocar dentro desse espaço, para que essas crianças pudessem ter ali uma aproximação sinestésica com esses elementos. E com o território, nós fizemos um movimento de sustentabilidade muito bonito no Resgate esse Igarapé. Durante o percurso desse projeto, aconteceu um sinistro à margem do nosso igarapé. Aqui ao redor, nós temos muitas pessoas em situação de rua, e num dia, né, fatídico, aconteceu de uma dessas pessoas roubar os fios do entorno e queimar para tirar o cobre. Nessa queima de retirada desse cobre, aconteceu um incêndio às margens do igarapé e queimou toda a nossa mata ciliar, destruindo ela e destruindo todas as espécies arbóreas que nós tínhamos ali naquele entorno. Então, nesse contexto, nós, enquanto território, enquanto comunidade escolar, resolvemos fazer o resgate desse lugar. Então, nós fizemos ali uma ação que culminou com a coleta de aproximadamente, hoje, 10 mil garrafas PET, que outrora haviam sido jogadas nas margens do igarapé. 15 mil tampinhas de garrafas também foram recolhidas, e nós fizemos instalações de artes com esse material, nós entregamos para associações de catadores do território, do entorno, então nós atingimos, assim, uma quantidade bem expressiva de pessoas. Paralelo a isso, a gente também trouxe parcerias externas, como universidades, para que a gente pudesse fazer esse subsídio aí de trabalho, né, desse espaço do Jardim Sensorial. Então, nós trouxemos uma universidade do Amazonas para que pudesse estar fazendo esse resgate arbóreo. Fizemos a plantação de aproximadamente 500 mudas arbóreas para resgate desse espaço que havia sido queimado, que hoje se somam a 20 mudas plantadas em território metropolitano de Manaus, virando assim uma política de governo aqui no Amazonas, esse nosso levante, aí essa nossa sementinha, que hoje se transforma em muitos outros territórios aqui dentro do nosso Amazonas, de resgate, replantio e reflorestamento desses espaços. Construímos um livro autoral a partir desse contexto, de todo esse trabalho, né? E também chegamos à final de um prêmio nacional, conseguimos galgar aí, a partir desse trabalho, um prêmio nacional, que foi o Prêmio Escolas Sustentáveis aqui no Brasil, e chegamos também à fase internacional, concorrendo aí com países da América Latina, como México e Colômbia, e podendo socializar o nosso trabalho aí para o mundo, né? E nos sentimos muito felizes de poder hoje partilhar aqui com outros espaços o nosso trabalho, feito às margens do igarapé poluído, dentro do contexto amazônico, com tanta gente interessada aí nesse resgate, né? Nesse resgate da sustentabilidade e no resgate das vidas. Fico muito feliz e muito agradecida pela partilha.
Thank you so much, Maria Raquel, for sharing that. Looking forward to diving a bit more into the program in the Q&A later. And I will now hand over to Claudia from VVOB to give the implementer's perspective.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we are working in VVOB in Ecuador, specifically. So in Ecuador, we have a partnership with the Ministry of Education since 1988. And the purpose of this partnership is to strengthen the system for teacher professional development and school leadership development so that teachers and school leaders are well prepared to introduce best practices into schools. In the same way as Nova Escola, we believe that teachers are the main or the most important in ensuring that climate change education reaches the schools. For the past decade, we have worked with the Ministry of Education and focused specifically on teachers and school leaders in upper secondary technical education in what it's called the Bachillerato Técnico. And we have focused in providing students through teachers the skills they need for sustainable futures. The interest has grown into a BBOB flagship approach named Skilling for Sustainable Futures that we're implementing not only now in Ecuador, but also in Uganda, where we work with lower secondary schools. And in both countries, we're focusing in prioritizing skilling for sustainable futures in the agri-food and with a focus in climate change. We focus on agri-food because it's the sector that creates youth economic opportunities, and it's also a sector where there is a sense of urgency and momentum around the need for a green transition. This approach, the Skilling for Sustainable Futures approach, revolves about around 3 evidence-informed sets of teaching practices that we implement in Ecuador in collaboration with the world of work. First, it's career talks, where teachers invite professionals. This can be, for instance, professionals from the agri-food sector, where they come and they share their professional journey, their experiences and insights about their job and the industry, and inform students about employment and entrepreneurship opportunities, and with the objective of inspiring them to pursue further studies in the work or the field. The second one is project-based learning. This is a process guided by teachers where students investigate and respond to complex real-world problem or challenges over extended period of time. This approach fosters authentic learning experiences, and it's rooted in local realities. It's important to mention that project-based learning not only develops knowledge and insight, but also shapes attitudes and builds a breadth of technical and transferable skills. And importantly, it offers the students opportunities to translate their competences into actions. Just as to set an example, this school year, teams of students in Quito and Guayaquil, they worked on solutions to produce biogas from agricultural and food waste, for instance, creating energy sources for their schools and communities that is cleaner and more affordable than fossil fuels. And others, for example, experimented with solar-powered precision irrigation solutions as a way of local farmers to adapt the intensity of droughts. And then the third practice is work-based learning. In Ecuador particularly, this practice is included in the curriculum for Bachillerato Técnico, which is a module where students learn by doing, acquiring employability skills as they expand their contacts with the world of work through 6-week internships in host enterprises. In Ecuador, BBOB supports teachers in creating internships opportunities for their students in agri-food enterprises and applying sustainable and climate resilience practices. As a result of these 3 practices, students gain skills, knowledge, and awareness that they need to become change agents and strive for a more sustainable future. To bring these practices to as many schools as possible, the Ministry of Education and BBOB have opted for the combination of, first, a package of online courses for teachers, which focuses on topics such as climate change and agri-food, project-based learning, and also linking and creating relationships with the world of work, and to promote and integrate the study and career guidance and work-based learning into the classroom. These courses are offered through the ministry's online learning platform, Me Capacito, and teachers are awarded professional development credits for successful participation. The second focus is offering teachers and students a platform to showcase the climate actions that they have undertaken. The ministry holds annually the Feria CREA, which is an innovation fair where students can present process and results of project-based learning. The number of submissions is growing year after year, and the quality is improving as more examples and more support materials are offered to participate in schools. And also, one of our main achievements as of this year is that the Feria CREA is paying more explicit attention to climate change and environmental sustainability through a special category focused on green agri-food. For us, balancing scalability and quality is, of course, a key that we need to do to ensure that we improve in both fronts. Also, BBOB supporting the ministry to integrate climate change in a new education for sustainable development policy that is in the pipeline. The policy will come with practical guidelines on how teachers can integrate education for sustainable development and specifically how they can integrate climate change education into the subjects they teach. And also to highlight a result that we recently had is that the ministry recently decided to assign the responsibility of providing education for sustainable development to the Pedagogical Improvement Department, which is another positive sign of the commitment to include education for sustainable development within the system. So I want to finalize highlighting some of the lessons learned through this journey of implementing climate change education. Well, first, we should stay clear that climate change education should not be a daunting or extra task that teachers now have to take overboard, but it has to have the right support and encouragement and necessary tools to make it possible and motivating. We also found that it's very, very important to strengthen teachers' knowledge and understanding of climate change because there are a lot of misconceptions and misinformation. And that's why we have added a climate change and green agri-food course to the professional development package. But it's also important to boost teachers' confidence in their own ability to make change for the better, to better offer concrete curriculum-aligned ways to connecting climate change to the classroom and the community. And beyond that, teacher professional development for climate change education should be practice-oriented, contextualized, collaborative, and has to be accompanied with quality teaching and learning support material. Second, it's also important that ministries of education give teachers a clear sign that climate education matters. For instance, through policies, guidelines, and active encouragements, such as in Ecuador, the Feria Crea. And third, also, climate change education needs to be purposeful. It needs to be adapted to the local context, and it has to be adapted with trust-based partnerships across sectors. This is the only way that to face the complexity of the climate crisis upfront, and it should be based on local challenges and local solutions. In BBOB, we have worked cross-sector to develop the course packages with teachers. We have worked with special staff from the Ministry of Education, Agriculture, and the Ministry of Environment, and also for the creation of the green agri-food category in the Feria Crea. We have worked with an advisory board and educators, and also partners from other NGOs and agri-food enterprises. This is very important to make sure that the education we're providing is contextualized and related to the real-world challenges that that are out there. So it's very important, and we would want to highlight, I would like to end highlighting the importance of this kind of cross-sectoral collaboration and how it enables and how enabled and encouraged by governments, for instance, creating spaces for cross-sectoral dialogue and by integrating education in priority sectors such as the national determined contributions would be great to see for funders, and it would motivate to continue expanding climate change education. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claudia, for those reflections. Great. So I think we heard interventions at a kind of nursery level with at the ECD level. Claudia, you've been providing some examples at the school level through teachers and through government, and now with Amit, I know that you're kind of further along in the value chain as such, looking, how does that translate into green jobs as well? And so looking, I'll hand over to you to share some reflections from a kind of funder's perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks, Charlie, and thanks to Claudia, Maria, and all the previous speakers. It's been a really fascinating session so far, and I'm learning a lot myself. I work for an organization called Bridges Outcomes Partnerships, and we are a funder for outcomes-based financing, and we spend a lot of time actually funding education and employment outcomes. And actually, I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the work we've been looking at in funding green jobs. Now, It's been a fascinating journey of exploration. I mean, the reality is that the investments in green infrastructure have been increasing significantly over the last few years, and we all hope will continue to do so if we're all going to achieve the climate goals that we want to be achieving. What that does mean is that there are more and more green jobs being created and going to be created, and what that does create is a need for the skills to fill those jobs. And so we have been looking at projects. I think primarily I'll talk a little bit about the work we've been looking at in Turkey, where we've had an existing employment program and we're trying to layer on an additional piece of work specifically around green jobs, and exactly for the reasons we've been outlining the importance of addressing this challenge. And what we are finding is that it's much trickier than we thought it would be. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first is aligning around timing. And so Turkey is very fortunate. There's a lot of planned infrastructure investments expected from the World Bank and from others into green infrastructure in the country. The challenge is when the timings of those investments are going to happen, and when the timings of the transitions to green infrastructure will happen in the country. And we have been looking to support some green employment programs starting next year. And the challenge we have is, can we train people to do green jobs now when those jobs may not come online for 5 years? And what happens in that intervening period? So there's been a dynamic we've had to think about very closely of when is the right time to start training people for green jobs, and aligning that with when the infrastructure is going to be built and when those jobs are actually going to be needed. Because obviously training someone now for a job, I'm sure that both the job and the training will look quite different in 5 years' time, and with the speed of how things are moving. So we've been sort of figuring out when is the right time to actually invest to support the creation of the green skill set that's going to be needed to match the green jobs being created in the country. The second is actually around places and placement. So one thing we know that Turkey is going to be receiving a lot of funding from the World Bank. As yet, it's not been clear where that funding is going to be spent in the country. And with green jobs, and especially kind of infrastructure and green industry linked jobs, they are linked to place. And Claudia, you talked a lot about agri. Again, agri is very linked to place. So actually training people in the right place is critical. So really understanding where in the country those investments are going to happen and in which places is going to be critical to knowing which populations need to be skilled for which kinds of jobs. And at the moment, all of that's is up in the air. So, although we've been very, very keen to support a deep green skilling program in Turkey, we found it challenging until we know kind of where those investments are going to happen, or at least have a high level view of what that planning is, which is currently sort of happening now. It's very tricky for us to say we're going to support a nationwide institutional green skilling program. So at the cutting edge, I think it's going to be super, super important that governments and industry and the multinational bodies are really, really clear on their plans and planning of where green jobs are going to be created. And that's going to allow the skilling infrastructure to build to that planning and to what the requirements are going to be. And so we're sort of trying to get involved now and trying to really understand in Turkey what is happening and what are the dynamics of that investment, and actually what we're hoping we can do is fund the right jobs to be created at the right times to make sure that we're doing the most important thing that we want to do from employment programs, which is ensuring people actually get into jobs and use the skills that they're being given, and that those skills are actually adding value to those individuals and to the economy as a whole. So that's a critical part of this whole equation. That said, I think what I don't want to downplay is I'm talking at the cutting edge of getting people into jobs and getting people into green jobs. I think what I don't want to downplay is the importance of climate education for creating an understanding of climate change in the population more broadly. I think Claudia and Maria talked incredibly well to this. I think education serves two purposes. It's a vocational purpose, but it's also a much deeper kind of philosophical purpose of raising good humans who are going to solve the problems we need to solve in this world. And I think the work that Maria and Claudia have talked about is incredibly powerful solving the latter, and that is just as important a problem to be addressing for the long term. But it's such a kind of not wanting to forget that getting the vocational end right is going to be important as well, but it's reliant on so many factors beyond just skilling to get that right. And I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think we're at a kind of a point of change now, and I think we're going to see that the green infrastructure spend increase even further, is my prediction over the next few years. And so getting it right, understanding where the green jobs are going to be created, and skilling the right populations to be able to do those jobs, to address the skills gaps, is going to be vital. So organizations like Claudia can make sure they're training the right people at the right time for the right jobs.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to all our presenters, especially for all the insights, but also for keeping to time as well. That's great. That doesn't always happen. So what that's allowed us, which is brilliant, is some time to ask some questions. As I said, the chat is open, so please do put your questions in the chat, or what? Yeah, I'm going to ask a few questions myself, but then please do raise your hand if you want to ask a question to any of the speakers today. Claudia, I might come to you first. I think I just wanted to sort of build on something Ahmed was saying, and just get your view on that. Is that this is a rapidly evolving, green jobs and being ready for a green economy is changing and it rapidly evolving. How are you working as VVOB with schools and training institutions just to ensure that they keep their curriculum relevant? How do we, because the definition of green jobs may be changing over time. How do we do that?
That is a great question. Thanks for the question. Well, in VVOB, this may sound a little bit odd, but we've learned to keep our distance from the curriculum and the curriculum development process. And this is because the curriculum development process, normally it's a national process, it's a long process, often lengthy, it's very politically sensitive. And sometimes it's hard to focus our energy in the curriculum and continue. So, we have to kind of choose our battles, I would say, and we continue working with a focus on the practices that I've already mentioned. So we basically prefer to focus on curriculum enhancement. So what can be done in schools or at the school level that allows teachers to improve and enrich the official curriculum and better meet the needs of students and prepare the students for the current challenges. And this they can do by integrating new teaching methods or updating teaching resources and contents, such as the practices I already mentioned, career talks or project-based learning and work-based learning. And basically, that is what allows us to keep the curriculum relevant, I would say. It's just working through the curriculum, through practices, and allowing teachers to continue to develop their knowledge in the context, but also through these methods of such as project-based learning, which helps them develop a broad range of skills and tackling actually real-world climate change challenges and not only the technical skills. So they can, both teachers and students can learn new skills and develop new skills such as problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and all of these, which we believe are necessary for a green transition. We believe that the focus on real world challenges with local solutions is the key to the answer. And we believe that the way for education to stay relevant and teaching to stay relevant is to focus on the social, cultural context beyond the school. When there is active engagement with actors from the community, from the productive sector and the world of work, and when we're teaching and learning outside the classroom. So taking the education outside the classroom and focusing on the challenges that we are living at this moment and finding local solutions. So again, we try to move forward with teaching practices outside of the curriculum to show that the curriculum can remain relevant, even if it's not moving as fast as other areas are moving.
That's really that's great to hear, and an extremely kind of pragmatic approach as well. We know, I mean, myself as a former teacher, if there's a change in curriculum that creates a lot of extra work, and so that we always have to be careful about making too many changes. So providing those core skills, as you say, is absolutely critical. Maria Raquel, I know you are working with even younger children. I'm sure. I mean, I can see in your background that you're teaching them some skills on some basic skills on building as well. But I'm sure that you're not teaching them right for green for the green jobs yet. But it's great to hear examples about how you're introducing them to sort of early concepts of our environment, of climate, and with great results. Congratulations on your different rewards. But I would be interested also to understand, like, how are you engaging parents as well? Key kind of stakeholders, obviously, in our community. How are you engaging parents, and how have they responded to your climate-focused programs?
Então, essa coalizão, né, de forças a gente precisa ter para que, de fato, as ações dentro do trabalho, elas fluam, elas surtam efeito, ou melhor, como eu gosto de dizer, elas transformem as realidades, né? Então, nesse contexto, primeiro, a gente obviamente tem que fazer essa sedução dessas famílias, tem que trazer essas famílias para esse contexto, mostrar que, de fato, o território onde a gente vive, ele é um território colaborativo, ele é um território onde todos coadunam, onde todos vivenciam aquela realidade, onde todos estão imersos naquela realidade, e onde as ações que forem produzidas, elas vão impactar a todos. Então, é nesse sentido, mostrando a realidade, tentando mostrar, né, as mudanças que possam advir, né, dessas ações, é que a gente tenta ali fazer essa sensibilização com essa comunidade. É óbvio que aqui nós somos muito atravessados por muitos marcadores sociais, né? São pessoas periféricas, né? Vivem às margens de um igarapé poluído, tem todo uma problemática envolvendo aí as enchentes, que quando enche o igarapé transborda e entra dentro dessas casas, impacta essas famílias, impacta essas crianças. Então, é nesse contexto, é trazer mesmo para a realidade vivenciada. É assim que a gente tenta fazer aí essa coalizão, né? E não só as pessoas do território, mas atravessando também as paredes da instituição e tentando chegar em outros espaços, né? Adentrando ali universidades, adentrando ali outras secretarias que perfazem esse contexto. É assim que a gente tenta transpassar os muros para que, de fato, essa transformação social não fique apenas local e se transforme numa grande transformação social, onde a gente possa ali ver o impacto em outros espaços. Tanto é que hoje as ações de reflorestamento, as ações da construção desse jardim dos sentidos, ela já está sendo replicada, escalonada em outros lugares. Então, eu penso que é dessa forma que a gente tenta ali fazer essa articulação, né, com as famílias, com o território.
Thank you so much for sharing that inspirational story about, not only the parents, but the wider community, and how your work is having an impact there. So, Mohammed, I'm going to come back to you. And I think, we are obviously, I'm representing the Education Finance Network. So I would like to think about as well around how do we get more financing into this space, and how do we ensure that financing is going into the right place. So from your perspective, when you're looking at programs and thinking about investing, what can project developers be doing to attract investment like yours and others? What are you looking for when you think about success and returns?
It's a really, really good question, Charlie, and I think the it's not not an easy one. I think the dynamic is that I think the point I was trying to make in my little speech was that financing will follow financing in the sense that where the infrastructure and agri financing goes is where then the skills financing will follow. So when I look at our financing, I think when we're looking at this green space, we are, if I take the Turkey example, what we're doing right now is working very closely with the regional development agencies in the country to figure out where that green infrastructure investment might happen. So is it going to be, wind farms in the east of the country, as we've been hearing about, or solar panels in the center of the country? And if we look at agri as well, which areas are we going to see the changes in agri practices happen over the next few years? So we're doing a lot of kind of deep work with the regional development agencies to understand where that investment is going to happen. And then our money can follow to do the skilling work that's needed then to fill those jobs is our money will end up following where those investments happen, and we'll be looking to support the training providers that have are developing the right skill sets in the right places at the right time. And to me, that feels probably like the most critical thing is can we work together as a system? So can we work right top down from multilateral governments, private sector, skilling providers, and the education system? Is there a way for that interconnectedness to really come to the fore and make kind of clear and coherent plans around where money is going to go, and then where the skilling money can then follow? What we'll then be looking for is the providers that are going to be creating the right skills for the jobs of the future. Because I think the thing that we probably haven't covered in this conversation is actually how much skilling will change as well in the context of AI, and in the context of all the change that is expected to bring to the education system, to how jobs work, and all of those things. If any of that materializes, and again, none of us here probably know exactly the direction, but we all know that there will be some impacts. So we're trying to work with the providers that we think are going to have the flexibility to best adapt to what we think is going to be quite a challenging dynamic environment over the next 10 or so years, with both where the investments are happening and how the skilling environment's going to change.
And just to follow up, I mean, it's interesting about the right skills, but also how do you balance the sort of the two lenses of both climate impact and then job impact as well? Because some investments will have a very strong climate impact, but perhaps, for example, a solar wind farm, lots of jobs at the start, but then not so many jobs to maintain, which can often be disappointing, for the local community who are living quite close by to the project. So how do you manage those two kind of impact goals?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, we aren't investing in the infrastructure, so we don't make those choices of what kinds of jobs will be created, and when. We obviously would like to influence that and try and find things that are going to be supportive to local communities, alongside creating the climate impacts we want to see. And both things are important, right? So we don't want to stop things like wind farms just because they're not creating jobs, if they're going to be in the right place and create the climate impact we want. Similarly, we want to see employment programs in the right areas where we are seeing, for example, Turkey has a 20% youth unemployment rate, which is one of the highest in Europe. And so can we work to both create jobs and create jobs which are going to lead to green impact? That's the dream, but it's tricky for us where we are as a relatively small financier to influence where those big flows of finance are going. And I think what we're trying to do is figure out exactly that point, Charlie, is like, what are the jobs that are going to be created, both in the short and long term, and how can we make sure the populations are skilled up to be able to address not address, but be able to kind of take on those jobs, deliver both the climate impact we want to see, but also hopefully see the growth in the local economies that we would also like to be seeing and contributing to. Yeah, I think it's tricky as any one small part of the puzzle to really influence those decisions.
Thank you. I mean, I have lots more questions, but I'd also like to give the audience a chance to ask as well. I see, Toon, you've put a comment in a question in the chat, but I'd love to invite you just to kind of, if possible, to kind of ask that question and who, if that's directed at anyone in particular as well.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Hi, I'm Toon, calling from Manila, Philippines. I find this very interesting because it's an important topic, and I think you managed to bring together really excellent people. So thanks so much for this. I have many questions, but I had to choose. And my first question is, I think at each of these levels, that from early childhood all the way to TVET, do you, in your programming, do you identify specific climate change related competencies, whether it's mitigation, adaptation? Do you call it as such? Do you call it climate change as part of your your interventions, your programming? And related to that is there a demand from the governments, from the communities, from the donors to be smart about your climate change programming, about your climate change intervention? So, because I can see the examples that were given, I think they make a lot of sense beyond climate change. They don't have to be climate change focused, but it's good that they are. And so my underlying is the rationale for this climate change related programming. What is the difference between what you would normally do and not and now? So I was just curious about maybe a bit more the underlying rationale for this. But anyway, it's not directed to anyone specific, but I of course I have a strong interest personally in TVET. So maybe Claudia, if it makes sense to you to answer, I would appreciate to hear from you. Thank you.
Hi. Sure, I can try to tackle that question. So the way that we focus our programs, yes, we do focus on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation, but I would say the competences that we are focusing more specifically on are soft skills. So kind of one, knowledge and literacy, like knowing what climate change is, understanding climate change, the ecosystem, the environment. And then with that, developing these soft skills. So critical thinking, problem solving, analytical thinking, planning and foresight, also collaboration and communication skills, creativity, curiosity. So basically, it's more focused on developing the soft skills that would give the students and teachers the abilities to understand the situation, identify the challenges that we're facing, and provide or propose real-world solutions. And then to answer the second part of your question of whether governments is asking for this. So I'm going to focus my answer in Ecuador because that's the context where I work and what I understand. In Ecuador, there is a huge movement right now, for focus for education and sustainable development. So not climate change specific, but education for sustainable development as a whole. And it is through this process or this interest with the Ministry of Education that we started our discussions on the importance of strengthening education for sustainable development in Ecuador. And through this, we found interest from donors specifically on climate change education. So we basically combined this both interests, climate change education for donors and education for sustainable development for the Ministry of Education, which obviously climate change education is a part of it. And that's how we are working together on including climate change education and education for sustainable development. And we're actually building this together with the government, building new plans, building a new policy for education for sustainable development, and how to integrate, specifically how to integrate climate change for climate change within the education for sustainable development. Yeah, so I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
Can I come in as well, Charlie, on this one?
Yes, please do.
So it's fascinating because I wear two hats within Bridges. So I look after some of our employment work, but I also manage our portfolio of projects in the climate space, which we're looking at, which is more investing in projects that are trying to deliver carbon outcomes, things like forestry and biochar and things. And when I have my kind of climate hat on, I'm very, very focused on climate and very much thinking about climate as an outcome. But actually, when I'm thinking about green skills, that falls much more usually into the employment space. And actually, I'm often thinking much more about what does it mean to create the jobs. And I think we like green skilling because it's links to climate outcomes, but actually we see it as a skilling opportunity. I think links a bit to what Claudia was saying, that when we think about that, we think about what are the skills that people need to thrive in the jobs, and then there's a layer of technical climate skills that are linked then to the jobs that are being created in the countries in which we're looking, and more specifically the regions in which we're looking in within those countries. But then there's a layer of soft skills that I think Claudia is talking about developing, and to be honest, those apply across industries. We also have programs focusing on things like tech skills in Turkey, and there's a layer of skills that are just about skilling people for the new economy, and so we don't often, and actually when we're talking to candidates joining our programs, we're not talking about this being a green jobs program. That's not what's interesting to them. What they're interested in is, can we provide them with the skills that's going to give them a career for the long term, and a good paying career for the long term. So actually, they're being very, very frank. They're less interested in the climate outcomes of their work. They're more interested in, is this job going to provide them with the security they need for their future? And so that's the narrative, that's the dynamic that we are talking to when we're talking to the candidates who do join our programs.
Thank you so much for sharing. AJ, I can see your question in the chat as well. I don't know if you want to share that as well. Maybe they.
Sorry, I'm in a library, so it might be easier if you can share the question. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Okay, cool. So, are there any platforms that are bringing educators, curriculum planners, industry funders, and policy representatives together for systemic dialogue? If not, would be your key? What would be your key suggestions for global education conveners? Okay, I think that's a great question. Given that often we are talking in our own kind of groups. Hopefully today what we've tried to do is to kind of expand that with different representatives. But I don't know if anyone has got a response to that in terms of anyone like a part of or seeing any sort of really great platforms that are bringing together these different players.
Charlie, happy to. Not a very good answer, but we're trying to do this in our own little way in the work we're doing in Turkey, and because we just think it's critical to make sure that we're making skilling investments in the right place. But I being in the country, actually, what we found is a very disparate discussion. So the interconnectivity between all these parts of the system that Ajay has very, very thoughtfully outlined. We've not seen it in the country. Now, I obviously I don't know in different countries, maybe it's being done more effectively, but it's not something we're seeing happen in a systematic way in Turkey, at least. Would be really interested if anyone else in the panel has insights on it being done in other countries. But yeah, no, it's not something that we've seen, but we think it's fundamental to making this thing work effectively. So the more we can kind of as a group encourage it to happen, the more I think we will achieve what we want to in this green skilling space.
Just to add on that, there are some platforms of EVOB we've been engaged with. For instance, the Office of Climate Education that is relevant to BVOB, and of course as key players in education and climate action. So the OC is one of those platforms. Then there is the UNESCO Greening Education Partnership. So at BVOB we try to be part and participate in as many of these platforms and be members of. So that's another one. Yeah, and of course the very well known, the Global Partnership for Education. So there are many platforms coming up. And so to answer your question, you could try and find out as many as those and the relevance to your organization. But these are all very important platforms. For instance, in Kenya, we have the Regional Education Learning Initiative, really. And so, yes, those are just some of the examples that come to mind.
Thank you. And I can see, Claudia, there's another question for you here from Philomena. Just this around, and it's how does VVOB scale? I don't know whether Philomena if you're able to provide a bit more context or, how are you thinking about scale? Beyond the programs that you have described.
Super. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm Philomena from the Netherlands. So I'm thinking of scale from how do you, because Claudia did mention that they kind of try not to interfere with the national curriculum process because it takes time. And we all know, even though it takes time, it's actually the quickest and easiest way to scale or to kind of make things more systematic. So if you don't work from that perspective, can you share some of the ways that you have scaled up using your current methods?
Yes, thanks for the question. Also a tough question. So one of the ways that I would say we scale or make our ensure that our programs reach a different level is because we always work in partnership with the Ministry of Education, and there's different ways of making it more systematic. So I'm going to go to some of the examples that I've already mentioned. But for example, we identify systems within the Ministry of Education where they are working in certain things. So for example, the Feria Crea, which is an innovation fair, it happens annually. It's been happening annually for the last 20 years. And the Ministry of Education invites schools and their students to present their projects in the fair. One of the things that we did, we identified the fair as a space where projects for climate change could be presented. It was not a category, so we sat with the Ministry of Education. This was actually this past year. And we created a new category focused on agri-food and climate change, and created the basis for the projects to be to present projects on this specific category. So now the category is included in the Feria Crea. It's a new category, but it's a new opportunity for students and teachers to participate in the Feria Crea with this specific category. So again, it's not in it might not be in the curriculum or might not be aligned what we're doing specifically or waiting for the curriculum, because it is aligned in a way, but I'm saying we're not changing the curriculum, but we are creating spaces where these projects can still be seen, promoted, and where students and teachers can be encouraged to participate in this project because the category exists. The second example that I'm also going to use from our program is that we create conversations with the Ministry of Education about, for example, in this case, climate change education. So we started on 2023, the Ministry of Education launched the Plan Natura, which is a plan focused on education, basically in education for sustainable development and how to implement education for sustainable. So we use this plan to start the conversation on climate change. So how do we also include climate change education in this plan Natura, and how do we ensure that climate change education also is part of the conversation? So we started talking about the plan Natura, what's the better way to move forward to ensure that education for sustainable development is part of the curriculum, and that led to a conversation that, okay, we just don't need a plan, but we need a policy that ensures that education for sustainable development is included within the system. And through these conversations, actually, I had this conversation with the ministry actually last week. We were having an event on education for sustainable development when we brought students and teachers, and the director from pedagogical improvement came to me and said, like, through all these conversations, we realized that we don't have an statute that says that anywhere in the Ministry of Education that somebody is responsible for education for sustainable development. So now we're creating that statute, and we are going to be responsible for education for sustainable development. So it's, again, not through the curriculum necessarily, but it's a way of making it sustainable and scalable, because it's now part of the ministry. It's part of the responsibility of a direction at the ministry. So now education for sustainable development is the responsibility for somebody in the ministry, and this includes climate change education, for example. So just to wrap it up, basically, we find different ways. We have a constant conversation with the Ministry of Education of what we can do, what we cannot do. We try to identify initiatives that already exist, that the ministry already is working on, and how we can make sure that we can make sure that this can become something that is ingrained within the Ministry of Education, and not necessarily through the curriculum. And then there's the other part is that we work with the ministry in providing, in developing teacher professional development that is then given to the ministry for free. So this will be available in Me Capacito, which is the ministry's platform. And it's a way to expand everything that we're doing. For example, we're working now specifically with Bachillerato Técnico, but once our program ends, everything is going to be handed to the Ministry of Education, and it would be available for anybody in the system. So it's another way of making it scalable, even if without, or basically after the program, where teachers can still be able to reach this or take this capacity building programs and put it in the classroom. So hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can see Job has a question in there. I've just replied to that in the chat, Job. So if you could just clarify the kind of type of support you're talking to, and then we can try and come back to that question. But I also want to ensure. Yeah, I had another question for Maria Raquel that I didn't want to sort of miss the chance to ask. I'm sure, given the sort of high profile of your program, that you have kind of many teachers that come to you asking for advice on setting up climate focused programs. So I would love to just hear, like, what sort of advice do you give them as teachers are sort of setting out? What have you learned along the way around what works, and sort of what have you learned from the challenges as well?
De fato, né, existem muitos questionamentos em relação ao nosso projeto, a parte executória do projeto, a parte de preparação, e eu sempre tento falar aos meus colegas, aos meus pares, que ouvir as comunidades, tentar perceber as dificuldades, os atravessamentos que tem no nosso território, ele é a chave para que a gente possa agir, né, localmente e ampliando aí o nosso horizonte nessa transformação do todo. Então, eu sempre falo para os meus pares que a principal ideia é você tentar entender o seu território, tentar entender aquelas comunidades, tentar entender ali aquele ambiente ao qual a sua unidade, a sua escola a sua comunidade ela está inserida. Então, esse é sempre o conselho que eu oferto, né, para aqueles que buscam ali, como é que a gente faz, como é que a gente vai fazer essa adaptabilidade. Aí você vai verificando como é que você vai fazendo esse atravessamento dentro dessas ações. Obviamente que muitas vezes o que dá certo na minha unidade não vai dar certo na sua, porque tem uma outra realidade ali dentro desse contexto. Então, a gente tenta fazer essa associação sempre que é possível, né? A gente tem tentado aí fazer, inclusive em outros estados. Agora a gente está com uma parceria através de uma associação com outros estados aqui mesmo da região amazônica, né? O Pará e o Tocantins também, a gente está tentando fazer aí essas adaptações. São estados diferenciados, mas com relação com territórios próximos, porque dialogam a mesma realidade amazônica, coadunam da mesma realidade amazônica, de todo esse contexto de educação climática, ao qual a gente tem buscado. Então, não sei se eu respondi sua pergunta, mas é mais ou menos dessa forma que a gente tenta fazer essa articulação.
No, that is great. I think really important and fundamental around kind of really understanding the context in which they are operating in. So yeah, thank you, Maria Raquel, for sharing those insights. Amit, I've given you a bit of time to prepare for Philomena's second question, which is around sharing some of your insights and trends that you're seeing in the green future, in the kind of future of green skills. So if you've got anything to share with the group, that would be great.
Philomena, I don't think you could have asked a harder question, but thank you for it. It's to be honest, it's a fascinating space. I think where we've been focused and where our work has been focused in the green skills space is, I guess, what we would call hard green skills jobs, for want of a better word, skills that are very linked to green infrastructure creation, very specific green projects, green, regenerative agriculture, those kinds of things, which are very obviously green. What we are seeing happen more and more is green being embedded into more and more jobs. So, I mean, as an example, I think I read a stat somewhere that 80% of companies now have a chief sustainability officer in the US, or 80% of the S&P 500 do. And with that means often teams of people focus on sustainability and green issues within companies. Now, whether you'd call those green jobs or not is up to you. But I think the trend is that green is being embedded not just in specific green jobs and specific green skills, but into more and more of our day-to-day realities of where our organizations are going as we realize, both as governments, as companies, that we do need to focus on sustainability if we're going to keep this planet going. And so my big trend probably is that, yeah, we'll see more of a need for people who understand sustainability and understand some form of quote unquote green in more and more roles and more different types of roles. And green will need to be much more interconnected into how companies and their supply chains and their infrastructure operates. We've been doing a lot of work talking to Microsoft on the climate side of our work, and one of the things they're spending a lot of time on is, for example, things like modular nuclear reactors next to their data centers. That will be an incredible new green energy technology that will get invented. But it's being invented from within the corporate alongside some universities. So there's I think green is just going to be much more embedded in the way that companies operate. Now, what that means for green skills, I don't know. Will green skills just become all skills? Will green just become part of the toolkit? How all of that will be defined and fit together, I think, is open to interpretation. My instinct is that we'll still see two things. We'll see kind of the technical green skills where our programs are focused is on one end, where there's specific green projects, things like creation of energy infrastructure, things like regenerative agriculture, things like kind of climate change projects like reforestation. Those will have very specific technical skills that will be considered green. But I think in more and more of our day-to-day jobs, there'll also be a greening of our jobs in some way, shape, or form. And our organizations will start to take things more seriously over the next 10 years. And that's sort of where I see things going. Sorry, it's a very abstract and high level view. I've got no specifics of like certain types of green skills are gonna grow faster than others, but that's sort of I think where things are moving towards.
Thank you. We were looking for the silver bullet there, but I think that was a very fair answer. Maybe Vina and Cristiano will be able to give us some insights to that question as well in your final words. I'm seeing one more. You're getting another question here from Maud in the chat. I was going to. I don't know if you want to quickly answer that, and then what I will do is we're going to move to the kind of like final, just some final reflections. But
yeah, it's a really good question, Maud. So I don't know if you want to. It's quite a long question, so I'll just maybe summarize what it's saying. It's I think saying that there's two competing interests. One is young people wanting long-term skills and companies potentially wanting short-term technical skills. I think it's a really good question. I think the way we've balanced that is that skilling providers need to be providing both, and technical skills are not enough, and soft skills are not enough. And so we are going to need to train people for the long term, and the long term is a lot of the skills that Claudia I think talks about in great depth in the work that her organization is doing is going to be tantamount to training people to be able to move on when specific hard skills perhaps change or move on, or the skill set around them changes, which it feels like will happen more and more quickly. So I think for all of us and for everybody in the workforce, we're going to have to, the core skill we're all going to need is a bit of flexibility, and that means having all the right soft skills to be able to be curious learners over our lifetimes. So whilst I think we are focused on the hard skills because that's where the jobs, that's where people will get employed in the short run, you're absolutely right to say that needs to be balanced with the soft skills, and we make sure that all of our providers are also focused on those soft skills alongside those hard skills because of that exact reason. Well, two reasons. One, if the skill set changes, they can adapt, but also even within jobs, we know that kind of hard skills are only part of the package of succeeding within a job. And so those transferable skills are going to be crucial to making people succeed both within the jobs they're doing now, but over their lifetimes.
so much for sharing, and thank you everyone for sharing their questions in the chat, and for those that have come forward and shared those out loud as well. It's been great to have that conversation, and really great to have the space for everyone to ask some of these questions. Thank you in particular to our speakers, Maria Raquel, to Claudia, to Amit for sharing everything. It was great to get such different perspectives from the classroom, from the implementers and from funders as well. And if you're on this call and you're learning more about education and how that interacts with climate, I hope that has helped you to see the importance that the education plays in our fight against climate change. And for all of those who are already sold on that message, and perhaps might be lucky enough to be going to COP in the next week, then keep take these messages with you, and there is an opportunity for us as a community to continue to advocate for the importance of education and the importance of financing for education in the climate space. But I would love to hand over now to my co-hosts Kevina and Cristiano for your final words.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. This has really been an exciting time. I think I've learned so much. Thanks to everybody who's contributed. I think this is the part where, like any, debate, discussion, we make commitments, come together and, go to COP30 with a unified message. I think my closing thoughts are that investing in education is investing in climate resilience, innovation, and hope. But the question before us is simple yet profound. How do we make education systems engines of green transition, empowering teachers, learners, and communities to lead, the change? From VVOB's perspective, we see every classroom as a seedbed for sustainability, where young people learn not only to adapt to the changing world, but also to shape it. Our work with governments, as Claudia has consistently indicated here, is working with the ministries of education and partners. We work across Africa, Asia, and South America, as well as Europe. And focusing on equipping teachers and school leaders and with the skills, mindsets, and tools to integrate sustainability and climate education into everyday teaching. So the question before us is simple. How do we make education systems and the engines of green transformation? Well, for VVOB, the answer begins with systems that learn, schools that lead, and learners who believe that their actions matter. Because when we invest in education, we invest in the power of people to build a sustainable, just, and hopeful future. And you mentioned something earlier, and this is something that we keep on seeing. I wear the fundraising hat here and partnerships hat at VVOB with my colleague Rory on the webinar. And consistently, what we keep hearing is funders saying we want programs that are innovative, but little or almost no time, if any, do we hear any of the financiers, the donors, talking about needing to invest in financing of institutional strengthening, which is where VVOB comes in. And yet, that's the beginning of it all. Yes, innovation is important, but what about the very basic systems that bring about these innovations? And I think that's where the key lies. So thank you again for being part of the webinar, and I'll hand you over to my colleague, Cristiano.
I can't hear your sound, Cristiano. Still nothing on my side. There we go. Oh,
You hear me?
I heard you. Yeah, that's
Oh,
better now. We
perfect.
can hear you now. Great.
So thank you guys so much for this conversation. It's been really inspiring to hear so many perspectives today. At Nova Escola, through our recent survey with teachers across Brazil, we saw clearly both the potential and the challenge ahead. First, teachers deeply understand the urgency of climate change. So on this survey, we saw that 90% of teachers in Brazil saying that the topic is very important. But almost most of these teachers still struggle to bring it into their daily teaching. The main barriers they face are lack of materials, limited time, and few opportunities for training or collaboration. So these are not small obstacles, but they are challenges we can address together. First, because of the transformation we need starts in the classrooms of basic education. It starts with the teachers who help students connect global climate issues with their own local realities. That's why we believe in Nova Escola that the path to a sustainable and fair transition must include investing in teachers, in the professionals, professional learning, their resources, and their visibility in global discussion like this one. If we truly want to prepare young people to build a green and just future, we must start where every future begins, in the schools with teachers. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of the day, and yeah, we look forward to keeping the conversation going together. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Do you want to stay behind, Asmita, or yeah, you're staying behind.
Do we need a debrief? I can end the recording now.
Okay.